They happen. The next one is in January, and if you haven't already gotten the invite, please let us know, and we'll get that to you. We can also go on our website and sign up for the next one. We'd love to see. We love seeing the same faces over and over again. And please also, anyone who would like to attend, would love to have you. Okay. Now on to who you're here to meet. Meghan Mead is the Deputy Director for the Mid-States region for the Network of Public Health Law. She recently released this brilliant fact sheet on AI and the legal implications of AI for public health departments. And we are so delighted to have her here today to speak to all of you. I can't wait for this presentation. So over to you, Meghan.
Great, thank you. I think we can, we could just click through that. We can go on. So nice to be here with everyone today. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that nice introduction. First, I do need to just give a brief disclaimer. This presentation is for informational purposes only. As we often say at the network, I'm an attorney, but I am not your attorney. So for specific legal advice, please consult your own legal counsel. So we can go to the next slide. So the network works to advance health equity and improve health outcomes by providing guidance on the effective use of law and policy. So we work with public health officials and practitioners. This includes policymakers, attorneys, community and advocacy organizations, and others. And we provide research and analysis, strategic consultation, and guidance. So more specifically, at our website, you can request free legal technical assistance. You can explore our resources. We have a ton of resources, issue briefs, blogs that we've done, fact sheets, archived webinars on pretty much any topic that would be of interest to anyone in public health. So definitely encourage you to check it out if you have not, or reach out to us if you have questions. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. So today I'm planning to discuss some of the legal considerations and risks with using AI as a health department. So as Nebu mentioned, this presentation is based on a fact sheet that I wrote and that the network published in November. And the fact sheet was partly based on a technical assistance request that we completed for a health department that Nebu connected us with. And so we do try to do this sometimes. If we have a TA request that's a bit more complex, and it takes more time, and we think that it's likely to be of interest to other PHAs, then we turn it into a resource or fact sheet so we can make that knowledge more generally available. And I also think this is just a great example of how the network operates. I'm here today. Nebu connected us with this health department. We did a fact sheet. So you can really see the networking role that we play. Next slide. So before we dive into the specifics of the fact sheet, I do want to zoom out a little bit and provide a quick overview on where we are with AI regulation generally. So the Biden administration, they took a more cautious approach, I would say, balancing safety with advancement. The Trump administration is more focused on promoting the rapid adoption and advancement of AI, perhaps less emphasis on caution or regulation. And just at the end of last week, President Trump signed an executive order to establish a national policy framework for AI and essentially block states from establishing their own laws on AI. The executive order directs the DOJ to establish a litigation task force to review and challenge state laws that might conflict with the national framework and I guess sue states. And similarly, have the Commerce Department review laws that may conflict with national priorities, and if permissible, condition certain funding to states based on their alignment with national priorities. So we don't have any comprehensive federal legislation at this juncture, but we do now have the executive order, which may affect what states can do in the future, what they've already done. And I do also want to note that existing laws may still impact AI. So for example, the fact sheet talks about privacy, HIPAA comes to mind, or copyright law. So even existing laws that we have that were in place well before AI came on the scene may still impact its use. Next slide. Unlike at the federal level, states have been really active in the last few years. So it's hard to give an exact count of the number of AI bills introduced, partly because some bills may focus exclusively on AI. Sometimes it's part of a bill on a larger issue. Sometimes it's a line item in a budget bill. But suffice to say that the bills number well into the hundreds, if not the thousands, bills that are introduced, that is. And then the bills that have been passed and enacted, at least in 2025, there were several dozen. And there are a bunch of legislative trackers out there if you want to take a look to learn more. The contents of the bills vary. Some are on privacy, some are on transparency, some are on governance, some are actually to do, research or fund research. So all sorts of flavors of bills. Like at the federal level, existing laws may also impact AI use in development. So as we'll discuss here in a minute, State Sunshine or Open Record Act laws. And again, while these laws were enacted at a time when AI was not around or not being used, they do impact how health departments need to think about and use AI. And then I wanted to throw this last part out there. Health departments, as you all know, you're more likely to hold or be working with sensitive or highly confidential information than some other government agencies. That's not true across the board, but it's important to keep in mind when you're evaluating your legal risk. So next slide. So all 50 states have laws requiring government records be made available to the public. These are usually called open record or public record or sunshine laws. And in general, these laws, they'll have a definition of what a record is, usually some sort of built-in presumption that records should be disclosed, and then exemptions for when they do not need to be disclosed. For example, there may be exemptions for confidential data. Health departments will want to be aware that the use of generative AI, including the resulting prompts and chats, the use of chatbots, these may create records that will be subject to disclosure. We can go to the next slide. And so I'm going to highlight what a few jurisdictions have done with greater specificity. Or we can hop ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So Washington Secretary of State, they have a policy that if a generative AI interaction relates to public business, including both the input and the output, it's a public record. And this is true even if you're using a personal account. So say you're using your personal ChatGPT account to conduct agency business, that can still create a public record because you're using it for agency work. And they also have a separate policy on the retention of generative AI records. So retention depends on the content underlying function of the record, not the fact that it's generative AI, which is kind of the same with all government records. How is it made? What's it for? What's its purpose? The retention will depend on that. The city of San Jose, they also have a great overall policy to take a look at. It's much broader than public records, and it covers quite a lot around the use of generative AI, including things like risk, how do you evaluate bias, how can employees use it, how should they not use it. But with respect to open records, it says any AI conversations related to city work may be subject to Public Record Act's requests, so employees should not use any prompts, and this is, I think, an important point to remember, that may include information that should not be released publicly. And San Jose explicitly does not allow employees to use personal accounts or use their work accounts for personal use. So no commingling of the personal and the public. And then Wisconsin, I linked to their policy here. It's a little simpler, but it does make clear that records can include generative AI output. And I know that there's a lot of others out there. These are just a few examples of states and jurisdictions that have started addressing this issue head on. And I offer these as examples and for reference, but just a reminder that every jurisdiction, their laws are going to be different. Your Open Records Act laws may also be shaped by the case law in your jurisdiction. So the specific application, what it will look like, may be a bit different. So I wouldn't necessarily treat these policies as gospel if you're in a different jurisdiction, but they are, I think, helpful to inform. And if you don't have a policy, to think about what it might look like. Next slide. Yeah, we can go on. So the first thing to remember is that not all LLMs, and apologies because I am a lawyer, I'm not a technologist, so sometimes I think I use a word that is maybe not as precise as it could be, but I'm going to stick with LLMs for now, are private. So if you're using just a free public model, inputting data could be impermissible. So say you input HIPAA protected information into an LLM, and that LLM then trains on the data, and you don't have a patient authorization for that particular use. Well, that could be a violation of HIPAA. Or say you're using HIPAA protected data with an LLM to do maybe certain analytics or something that are permissible, that's for healthcare operations or something. But you don't have a business associate agreement in place with the vendor. Well, that vendor, they're probably accessing and holding your PHI in a way that creates a business associate relationship. So if you don't have a BAA in place, that would be a HIPAA violation. Now, if you have a commercial model you use, or sometimes people call it a business model or an enterprise model, you may be able to enter confidential information into that model, but you would want to be clear on whether this is allowed by checking with your legal and your IT, or perhaps you are the legal and IT person, and making sure that you're clear that this would be okay. Using de-identified data or not inputting any raw data into the model at all certainly reduces your risk. Of course, that may also eliminate the utility to some degree of the model. So, that's again something you want to look at. And just as a general practice, I would encourage anyone, anytime you're planning to do an upload or send out, disclose, release potentially confidential data, it's a good idea to always just pause and evaluate whether that's appropriate under the circumstances, particularly with generative AI, but really under any circumstance. And then lastly, HIPAA certainly comes into play when we're talking about data related to health. But there's a lot of other state and federal laws that are implicated as well with public health data. So it's not only HIPAA. So if you're at a health department that's not a HIPAA covered entity, or you're a HIPAA hybrid and you're like, I don't work for the hybrid, the healthcare component portion, and so you're thinking these considerations don't apply to you at all, that's probably incorrect. There's likely at least some laws related to confidentiality at the state level, at the federal level, or both that apply to at least some of the data that you hold. Next slide. Okay, so perfect, thank you. So copyright issues are the next thing that we talked about in the fact sheet. These are complex. They're part of ongoing litigation. The issue is that many, if not all of these models have trained at least to some degree on copyrighted material. And as such, they do have the potential to reproduce text verbatim or images almost directly. The likelihood of a copy, I'll be honest here, I know I'm being recorded, but the likelihood of a copyright infringement lawsuit for a health department is probably pretty low, but it's not zero. So it is good to be aware of this. I actually think the bigger concern is the embarrassment if the health department was to use or publish something that was copyrighted. I mean, you could see, like, I can picture like a viral meme, like, well, look what our health department released and they pulled it from here, as well as the potential further erosion of public trust, which is something that we've obviously been struggling with for a while now in public health. So, be aware of that. And there was actually a case in the UK, although interestingly, I think the copyright portion of that case has been dropped, but it started because this AI company, Stability AI, they were being sued by Getty Images for copyright infringement. And Getty actually noted that some of the images that Stability AI was producing, it even included the Getty watermark on it. And then lastly, the thing to be aware of, if you're wanting to create your own content or written, or a product that is copyrighted, content that's generated solely by AI or with insufficient human control at this time cannot be copyrighted. So to the extent you want to produce copyrighted materials as a health department, you'll want to familiarize yourself with the current status of generative AI under copyright law and make sure that what you're producing meets that definition of copyrightable material. And we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So this fact sheet didn't cover all the legal issues. There's a lot out there. Litigation and discovery we didn't get into. I'm not a litigator, so if you have questions on that, I might have to come back to you on that. AI procurement and vendor contracting. This is actually an area that's really of interest to me because I think this might be an area where agencies may have some discretion and control, irrespective of what the federal regulatory environment looks like or what your state looks like. You have the right to put in your contracts to require certain disclosures from your vendors about their use of AI, maybe certain assurances or statements around safety, transparency around how your data is held and used and destroyed. And I'm sure there's a lot of other legal issues too that are on your mind and that I'm not aware of. And then the last thought that I wanted to leave everybody with is that because this field changes so fast, there may be issues in 6 months that aren't even on our radar today. So this is an area for continuous evaluation for legal risks and emerging issues. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. We so appreciate you. Okay, next is if anyone has questions for Megan, now is the time to do that. I'm going to start with I used to work at a local health department. Many other folks that have joined the call are working at local health departments. Most of them, like 95% of them, don't have dedicated legal staff. So what are the minimum safeguards? And actually, many of them don't even have dedicated IT staff. So given that, what are the minimum safeguards that health departments should put into place before using any AI tool? Like I guess, like what can they do on their own?
Yeah, I think I would first recommend having a policy around what is and isn't permissible, and you don't need your legal or IT to put that in place. You want to make sure it comports with state and federal law. If your agency's big enough to like have a work group work on this, that's ideal. There's also a lot of templates out there that you can use to get started. So you don't have to, so you're not reinventing the wheel here. And then train staff on what isn't allowed. And you can start small with your use cases in a way that feels very safe, where you're not dealing with, oh, we're sending our data here, uploading our data. So you could use it for research, drafting emails. If you're understaffed, which most health departments are, maybe helping with some of that time-consuming administrative tasks or developing rough drafts or first drafts of documents. And then if you're just using a free tool too, you can check and make sure, is there an option to opt out of data training? Look at what sort of privacy safeguards, if you're using the free tool, you could put in place. So that's probably where I would suggest that you start.
Awesome. Thank you. I also just put the link to the fact sheet. Oh, sorry. So that's the second to last message. There's a link to the fact sheet that Megan mentioned. Megan wrote and did this presentation on. Does anyone have any questions for Megan? I can keep going, but would much prefer for the participants to ask. Please feel free to come off of mute and ask the most brilliant public health lawyer I know questions. All right. Well,
I guess I'll ask a question, and then so I can't quite figure out how to frame this appropriately. Maybe I should have used AI to do that, but I guess you can see that I'm using my brain here. Right. So if I'm working in a small health department, I have a million other things on my plate. I'm dealing with, measles and everything and all these funding cuts. Like, what would you tell me to go tell my boss or to go tell somebody else about, like, what is like your one-liner or like short answer about like why should we care about the legal risks around this? Like, what would be sort of like your concise, like 2 sentences that I should email my boss about?
That's a good question. Gosh, I think, I think it's a way to avoid another big headache, first of all. And I actually think the protections that you can put in place around the use of AI are not a real heavy lift. Just sort of some basic stuff around recognizing that this might create a public record, making sure people are aware of that, making sure, you can you can actually tell, you can have it be like a one way, like you're not uploading any of our information to, to an LLM or to a model for use. You can sort of have these like basic thresholds in place. So I think a little bit of time up front avoids a bigger headache down the road. And second of all, people are going to use it no matter what. So you can, even if you, and I think that's like I think that's almost the bigger concern is then people might be using it in ways that you're not comfortable with. And so really getting out ahead of that. Yeah. And there are, like I said, there's some great templates out there for policies, which are, a good place to get one started. We've actually been working on one at the network too, to have an internal policy on it. And it's prompted a lot of great discussions, like what are the uses that we're okay with? What are the uses that we're not okay with? How do we think this can help our work? And like, what are the areas that we do not see it adding a lot of value to our work? So I think it can spark a good conversation. And of course, in my experience too, managers always like it if you volunteer to do the heavy lifting on the work. So that, that probably helps too. But in some ways that I think is nice because then you get to help shape what the policy looks like. You sort of create that anchor position based on how you may be using it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Juliana. Thanks, Megan. Anyone else? Questions for Megan? Okay. Sarah Franks.
Hi, nice to see everyone. My question piggybacks from Juliana's in having discussions with IT. There seems to be a lack of acknowledgement of AI just there. I don't know. I'm not really sure what the rationale of that is, and sort of a reflex response that, well, no one's using it, and we don't need to prioritize this right now. I really want to engage in more productive discussions, especially with this sentiment that I really feel is inaccurate. And especially when it comes to the nature of the work that we engage in. And I did point out that we actually use secure platforms that are AI enabled. And those options, IT attempted to disengage those from the platform somehow. But because it's embedded in the way the software works, they weren't successful. And there was discussions about, well, you shouldn't use this at all. Like, well, but this is what we have to do our work. There are no other alternatives. Turning it off isn't an option.
Mm-hmm.
If you could speak to conversations like that and any references or resources to just point them in the right direction about navigating this, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, others in the audience may have more insight on that than I do, but I think NACCHO has done a couple of studies, and maybe Pew too, on usage of AI. And so maybe showing them that, like how, the frequency and the increasing rate at which people are using AI might help convince them. And yeah, I'm surprised to hear that from the IT department. I mean, I think one of the things I've noticed in the last 6 months is, it's at this point, like it's everywhere. Like you type in a Google search and the first thing you get is like the AI generated content. So people are using it, people are relying on it. And you might even not even realize you're using it. Like you may be on some website where you think some smart search and actually it's ChatGPT that's like, doing it's doing it for you, but you can't see that. So maybe pointing that out to them. And again, I think, being like encouraging them to be proactive, like that might be an instance where, you're like, oh, yes, you're right. But we're going to plan for the future, something like that. So I don't know if others have any advice on that and how they've talked to their IT departments about that.
I have some insight on this, direct insight. That's a great question, Sarah, because It was ingrained where don't use AI. We're afraid of AI. It's going to take over the world. It's going to do something. So what I did was I came up with a business plan. Why? Give me a reason why you want to use it. Give me an example. You might have to go through an RFP process where you're giving them 10 reasons why you want to use AI and how it can be done, especially if you're going into it with a company that is going to be doing this for you. I'm not going to give out names of companies, but there are companies out there that will do this for you. And if you want to ride in their coattails with the AI company that will create like apps that will create follow-up programs, we will create websites that will perform duties that are done by hand currently, like they're paper processes that are done. Like I'll give you an example. Say we have an environmental department that someone has to pay for a permit, like not a permit, but a service for to do their water testing. And right now they do that all by hand. They send a check in, they do the process, and then they schedule 2 people to come out there 2 days during a week to do what they have to do. Well, that's all done by hand, and we want to be able to do that manually. So we're in the process of doing that currently through an RFP process to gain acceptance. We're putting the effort in. We investigated what we want. We investigated that this company does exactly what we want to do, and we are going to save the county money by automating credit card processes and check cashing processes